Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I'm excited to tell you I've got Dr. Rita Louise. She's a medical intuitive, and we're going to be talking about trusting your intuition. So warm welcome to you, Rita.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you about intuition.
Yeah, me too. So when did you first, do you think, became aware how powerful intuition was and what part it played in your life?
So it's a kind of interesting story. So I became interested in the whole concept of intuition, but back in the day, it was ESP. I became fascinated by the idea of ESP and started reading books about psychic development and personal growth and, well educated in that area.
So for the benefit of our audience, what does ESP stand for those that don't know?
Oh, extrasensory perception.
And to explain a little bit about what you mean by that.
I don't know, it's just what they called it,
Yeah, it's like the old name and the old description for intuition, which is like gut feeling on a base level, isn't it?
But it was definitely more a thing that you either had or not. Everybody has a gut feeling, but like ESP was more special. And it's interesting that they kind of let that terminology go away and replace it by intuition or psychic abilities or, a different concept. And so I was fascinated by that whole thing and wanted to be able to tap into it and all of this stuff, which never really happened. And then I found the Berkeley Psychic Institute and studied with them and came to the realization that I had been extremely intuitive my entire life, but no one ever connected the dots for me. No one said, when you walk up to someone and just jokingly look at them and go, well, where were you yesterday? Having them check for a brain tumor, only to find out that was where they were the day before.
Wow, that can be
that you actually are having an intuitive experience, but for me in that moment, I mean, other than every hair on my body was standing on end and I was shaking on the inside, I just thought it was some weird synchronicity and a interesting coincidence that it happened, and I think a lot of people don't recognize that the level of intuition that is innate in all of us, and we just write it off and don't pay attention to it.
So having just heard what you said, that it is innate in all of us, do you think that obviously is to varying degrees and we just have to learn to harness it better or become more aware to, I suppose, more skilled at learning how to use it?
Very much so. I liken it to being an artist. There are some people that you give them a pen and paper and they draw bad stick figures. And then there's Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo. And, another example would be dancing. There are some people that can't even keep the beat to the music. And then you have, these dancers that you just watch and are amazed at their skill, ability, and technique. Now, there's a certain amount that you can work to develop it and maybe get you better. So maybe you're not drawing stick figures anymore, or you can take a ballroom dancing class. And even though you're clunky on the floor, at least you're doing it. but then again, you take somebody like Michelangelo early in his life and put him in a art class, and it would just enhance and flourish his already natural ability.
Yeah. So for the most part, you're saying that people are that are actually skilled in this area, their intuition are naturally talented in that area of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And at what age did you become aware that this was a area that you were talented in your life?
So I was in my 30s when I realized that I was talented in the area, but I became interested in it when I was about 13.
So
And
interesting. So you became interested in it, but we didn't realize you was naturally talented and gifted in that area until you was quite later on in adulthood.
yeah. But again, no one ever connected the dots for me to say, when you have this experience, that is an intuitive experience, and I think that, one of the things that when I speak on intuition is just really sharing with people that we all have this gift, and it's not something you have to be born with, or it's not something that some people have and other people don't have. It's innately part of who we are and part of our energy system. And it's more about becoming aware of when we're receiving that information, when we're receiving that guidance, and listening to it and acting on it if appropriate.
So how do you develop that awareness and knowing? Where does it actually start? For you personally, obviously you've been on this journey. And you gave an example of actually saying, for example, you could say to somebody, where were you having a brain scan or something like that? And that's exactly where they were. But were there any other key sort of, I suppose, what would some people would think, ooh, that sounds a bit spooky, moments or aha moments where you can give examples of what happened in that regard?
But so as human beings, we all send, receive, and process information. And so we are constantly broadcasting our stuff. But in the same breath, we're also able to receive that information, so like the television station broadcasts the signal out there, and we turn on our TV set and we're able to watch TV. And so we're able to send like the broadcast station, but we're also able to receive. And we get those insights all the time, but a lot of times we just don't listen to ourselves and listen to that data. So for example, and this is just a very simplistic example, you get up in the morning and you're getting ready for work, or you're getting ready to go to the store, and like some little voice or this feeling says, well, maybe I should take a sweater, but you don't. And you go to the store, you go to work, and you're freezing. And you're sitting and going, God, I should have listened to myself. Well, the intuition part is that part of you that says, hey, maybe you should take a sweater. But something like that is so, and I'm going to say subtle, but when you start paying attention to that little prompting inside of you and then doing what it says, that is developing your intuition. But I don't want to discourage people. It's also developing your intuition when you sit there and recognize, oh, well, yeah, I got that message this morning, but I didn't listen to myself, because it's just a matter of time and paying attention to all the times you don't listen to yourself that you start to listen to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, because you don't know what you don't know until you do.
And sometimes it's like the information that comes in is just so, I don't want to say bizarre, but like it just seems so random.
Yes.
But then again, in hindsight, it tends to be really right on. And I know everyone listening has had that happen to them. Everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely 100% resonate. So would you say the intuitive voice is the quieter voice, and I suppose the ego mind voice is the louder one when we're reacting or responding to experiences?
That's a great question. And I will say definitely, definitely yes. But the ego voice will kind of go on whatever's going on in the moment, you know? So, I like to keep my examples really simple, so you sit there and think, well, what do I want to do right now? Or what do I want to have for dinner? And you might think, oh, well, I should have some chicken, but then you ask again in 20 minutes and you get a different answer. The intuitive voice that, when it's coming from spirit or the universe or God, whatever term you want to use to talk about that piece of information, that communication. And I just say it this way, it nags. It will nag you and nag you and nag you with the same bit of information. True story. So I finished my studying at the Berkeley Psychic Institute. I moved, so I was no longer able to participate in their training. And so I would ask myself, well, what should I do now? And I would always get this like, well, you need to go back to school. You need to go back to school. And I'm like 3 months, but then I wouldn't do it. And then like 3 months later, because I'd find something to do, it's like, well, what should I be working on now? And I'd get, you need to go back to school. That went on for 3 years. I mean, in the meantime, I got my hypnotherapy certification, and I got my Reiki master certification, so I mean, I did go back to school, but every time I asked, it was, you need to go back to school. Fast forward 3 years, and I'm still getting that same message. And I decided to go back to school to get my degree as a naturopath, finish that. And, I'm very project oriented. And again, ask the question, so what should I be doing now? Except now the message was much more specific. And it's like, you need to get your PhD and you need to write a book. And it was like, okay, and this is like within weeks of finishing the other degree. It's like, okay. So, but now I like kind of figured out that I should listen to that voice versus ignore it. So signed up to work on my PhD, finished that, wrote the book, and I have never, ever, ever been told I need to go back to school.
So you knew you was done with the academic, I suppose, route of learning, but there are obviously...
I guess they decided that I was done with the academics because I have never gotten that message again. Which I found really interesting.
Yeah. Because there's other ways of learning. Experiential life learning is a way of gaining expertise, isn't there, in whatever field that might be, as well as the academic path.
Mm-hmm.
So did you feel as though you learned just as much post-academia as what you learned during academic learning?
Well, it really wasn't my goal to go back to school, I get a PhD. It was not on my radar. I mean, in different areas, that didn't really have to do with my business or it didn't have to do with my practice. I mean, I'm a perpetual learner, so since writing the book for my PhD, I've written 5 other books, and so even though it's not educational, it's like, I wrote a book about ghosts, dark angels, an insider's guide to ghost spirits and attached entities. I wrote 2 books about ancient mysteries, kind of ancient alien type genre. I've written 2 books about dysfunctional relationships and healing yourself from dysfunctional relationships. And so even though there's not the academic thing, there's these other projects. And I keep saying to myself, oh, you're done writing books. And then one day I'll wake up and it's like, okay, well, you need to figure this out. Oh, and there's always this and you need to write a book about it. And I'm like one of my books, it's called The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist. And it talks about the relationship between sensitive people or people that have a lot of wounding, like early childhood trauma, and how they tend to get involved with narcissistic individuals. But when I was getting ready to write the book, I kept getting this message that you need to tell your story. You need to tell your story. And I'm like trying to go and write this book and get it started, and it wasn't happening. And it wasn't happening. And it wasn't happening. And so like through my own personal experience in life thing, it's kind of like I finally surrendered to that dictate of you need to tell your story, wrote my story, and of course there's the caveat, oh, and you have to include it in the book, which was like horrifying at that. But I wrote my story and made the internal commitment that I was going to include it in the book, and the rest of the book just came out of me. Bam.
And you know that, you're meant to do something when it feels in flow, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Very much so. I mean, that's definitely an indication that, you are listening to spirit and doing what you need to do.
And sometimes, I suppose we can resist and try and fight that niggle, if you like, or that message that we know is the correct message, purely because it feels uncomfortable. And sometimes we do have to get uncomfortable, don't we, to get into that flow.
So I'm laughing because, and I use the word surrender very intentionally because it really is an act of surrender. I often joke around that, I'll get these, you need to tell your story, and I will sit and fight internally and fuss and argue and then surrender. But what I have personally learned is that when you're being given this dictate and you don't do it, then the universe, then you start having all this weird stuff start to happen to you to kind of force you to move forward. Car accidents, my story, car accidents, weird, not pleasant things until you finally listen. So I've just learned to surrender a whole lot earlier, even though I still argue. I don't just do what they say. It's just I don't really want to do
that. And that's the ego mind stepping in again, isn't it? To sort of try and override what you need to do, intuitive action.
But, sometimes what you're being guided to do is big.
Yeah.
Going back to school and getting another degree, ending a relationship that, is hard, and you really have to just take a breath and own it. And sometimes it's a white knuckle experience to do what you're being guided to do. And so I don't want to minimize the amount of effort it might take or amount of commitment it might take in order to do those things. Because sometimes it's really hard, or you don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, or you don't know why you're doing it. But, if they're nagging, that's my rule of thumb. If they're nagging, then it really is something that you are being compelled to do.
Yeah, I had a very strong similar phase when I was with my ex-husband for 23 years, and it wasn't an abusive relationship. It was okay. It was satisfactory. It was happy-ish. He was a good husband, a good father, but I still didn't feel fulfilled in that relationship. And I was I was listening to this voice all the time for the last 2 years I was in that relationship about I need to leave because there's a better match for me, I suppose, in my future. And but it was hard because he'd done nothing wrong, you know what I mean? And I didn't want to introduce any third parties into the relationship, which I didn't, you know, because I felt that it would be wrong to do something like that. He's a good guy. But in actual fact, he said he found it harder facing up to the fact that I hadn't got somebody else in the picture because it made it feel like an even bigger rejection for him to accept at that point. So yeah, and I hadn't even thought of that at the time, but that's what he felt, and it was so hard, and I felt such huge guilt around it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, from his point of view, because it's like you just don't want to do it anymore.
Exactly.
So let
And
me ask you this question. So are you happier now?
yeah, I've got no regrets, but the guilt hung around for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
especially as it really badly impacted my daughters as well, who were coming up for 17 and 19 at the time, and it was so hard, so hard because, as I said, we had from the outside and the inside, what most people would regard as a good relationship, and we
Mm-hmm.
did. The friendship and respect was there. It was just as I felt like there was something missing in that relationship, and I didn't know what it was. Um,
But when you're with someone for such a long time, especially, if you get married when you're young, it's like you're not, I'm going to say, like, you're not fully developed, and as you grow and mature in the relationship, it's like you become you and they become them. And, it might not be that they're doing anything wrong, but it's like, but you're just ready to grow in a different way that is not tied to that relationship.
yeah, and absolutely correct on the latter part. But actually, we didn't meet till I was well, we're both nearly 26, nearly 27, so it wasn't like a high school relationship. It was a relationship that, I would say at a fairly mature age, we met and then got married. I was 29 then when we got married, so it wasn't so much that we got married young. I think it was more that I got onto a path where I needed to heal some past trauma and got involved on my own personal development journey, and that changed me.
Hmm?
And he wasn't, or what, didn't want to go on any sort of personal growth or personal development journey, which is fine. I've got no problem with that. But we then started, going on different paths in
Hmm.
life.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And you grow and you move to where you need to be, and it happens. But I would assume that you still have a good relationship with him and there's not contention, and it's not like every time you see him, you're like, ugh, I hate you.
no, not on my part, but on his part. He never wanted us to be friends or amicable after that. And sadly,
Well,
although
that's
I was
sad.
open to that and still am, that's not the case. But that's not through my side not wanting it. It's through him, and still, I suppose, feeling deeply hurt
Wounded.
still around it all. Even though he 18 months later he did find somebody else, and as far as I know, they're still together. And this is going back to I mean, we separated in 2009, so it's going back a few years now. So I think he probably, if he was to speak to me now, would say it was all for the best because as far as I know, he's in a happy relationship now. But I don't know because he didn't want
Mhm.
to have a relationship with me after that.
Well, that's just sad to hear, especially for your kids and stuff. That's sad to hear.
Yeah. So going back to trusting your intuition, um, how do you know the difference between what is your intuition and what is maybe your ego mindset, do you think? Rita?
So your ego will scream really loud, and be really pushy and be very demanding with what's going on. And when the ego's engaged, it's really hard to, I don't want to say it's hard to make a decision, because the ego will say, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And the only way that you can hear your intuition is to find a quiet spot, to quiet down what's going on inside. If something happens and you're in a stress response situation, fight, flight, or I want to say fawn, but that's not freeze.
Freeze.
Fight. It's kind of like the ego and our critical thinker and all of this stuff is going on inside, and we can't hear that quiet voice as to what to do. And it's only by calming down what's going on through meditation, through tapping, by going to the gym and exercising, through various techniques that will calm down the ego, because the ego wants to be in charge. The ego wants to control everything. And so really the only way that you can tap into that voice is by calming that ego down. And we all have moments where the ego is not the prevailing and overwhelming participant in what's going on. But usually when we can kind of move the ego to the side, we are always in a more peaceful, present moment state. And that's when that inner working can come to the surface and guide us.
Absolutely. I think if you have got a lot of distractions in your life during the day and you're not sure or can't really face or find the space, I should say, for a moment to really listen to your intuition, I think what helps is probably, asking yourself whatever is a profound question that you want answered before you go to sleep at night, and trusting the answer that you get in your sleep and overnight as to what you receive in the morning has really worked for me anyway.
Well, and doing something like journaling, where you just take a piece of paper or a notebook, and you might have a question, or there might be something going on, and using that as a vehicle for getting to a deeper place within yourself. Because so let's say the question is, like, what should I do about this relationship? And it gives you the opportunity, like if there's hurt feelings or there's bad stuff going on, that you can kind of unload that and then get to that deeper, quieter place. I mean, journaling is a meditative tool, but it also can help you tap into yourself and tap into your inner being as well, and get answers if you're open to them.
Absolutely. I think it can be quite cathartic, can't it, to sort of
Very
release
much so.
suppressed feelings, because obviously if you are feeling anger and resentment in your relationship, and there obviously are going to be times even in a good relationship where that is the case, writing it down as to why you're angry or venting on a piece of paper is far better than suppressing it and potentially then sweeping it under the carpet and creating more resentment that's going to build up to something bigger later on down the line. But also it could potentially cause you illness, because you're putting yourself under a lot more stress if you're not venting it one way or another. And you don't want to be lashing out at people down the line, because you've not addressed it early enough, and now it's built up to be the straw that's broke the camel's back.
Yes, ma'am. And sometimes as you're writing, these deep, profound insights will just come up and out of you. And it's like, wow, I never thought about that before, or I never looked at it from that perspective or whatever, because it gives you the opportunity to take the conscious mind, which the ego is tied to, and kind of put it over there, on the shelf for a little bit, and Earlier we were talking about being in the flow, and journaling is a way to help you get into the flow. And when you're in the flow, that voice will come to the surface.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. So, any other tips around trusting your intuition that we've not already talked about, Rita, that you would like to share?
The biggest message that I would love for people to have is start paying attention to what's going on inside. If you're in an experience and it's uncomfortable, notice that. If you get well, I should take a sweater, notice that. And it's not a judgment thing of whether you take it or not. It's the noticing part. It's becoming aware that, oh, well, I had this feeling, or I got this message, or I had this vision of something. And then down the road, because again, the more you pay attention to it, the more you become aware of it and how your body is receiving it and processing it, the more likely, the more ammunition you'll have, like, oh, well, maybe I should listen. I mean, there are things that I have done where I'm just like, okay, so, I'm getting this like, well, you need to do this. And it's, okay, this is a bizarre story. So my dishwasher broke and it was right at Christmas. And so there was no service person that was going to come to my house. And there was like 4 inches of water in the bottom of the dishwasher. And I had to wait until after the new year to have somebody come. So that's like 2 weeks. And I'm like, that dark, murky liquid in the bottom has to go. So I'm sitting on the floor with a coffee cup and a bucket and some ShamWow towels. And I'm like trying to scoop it out, was not working at all. And so internally, I asked myself, okay, there's got to be something better. What could I use? And the first thing that I envisioned, which was so random, was a turkey baster.
Wow.
And I was like, and so like, if I wasn't used to like getting this weird material, I would have gone, oh, that's just too weird. But you know what? I got up, I got my turkey baster, and within 20 minutes, I had all the water drained out of that thing.
I love that. That's a great
But again,
example.
it could be totally random, and it's just a matter of learning how you as an individual receive that information. And that's where the awareness part is. And then there's the doing part, which is, the doing part.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Rita Louise, what is the best way that audience members can connect with you should they want to find out more about this intriguing topic of trusting your intuition?
Sure. So they can go to my webpage, which is soulhealer.com, SOULHEALER.com, soulhealer.com. And my page is loaded with articles and information. You can get my books there. You can reach out to me. I recommend people use the contact form if you would like to schedule a private consultation with me to talk about anything, and utilize my intuitive services. And then one last thing that I would love to share with your listeners is on Thursday night, I do a live stream. It's called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise. And I open the show with like 15 minutes of some topic, whatever I'm being led to talk about that day. And then I open up the chat line and people can get a free on-air psychic reading. And all you have to do is come on and say, hey, Dr. Rita, I would like a reading, and give me a number between 1 and 3, which is how many times I'll shuffle the cards. And then I'll pull a card for you and give you a reading. Totally free. It's really fun. I have great people that are in the chat room where it's like a family. And the best way or the easiest way to join the chat, I mean, it is aired on multiple platforms. But if you want to join the chat and get the free on-air reading, the best place to go is YouTube. And my channel is Just Energy Radio. And that's 3 words, Just Energy Radio. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central, U.S. time, 7 p.m. Central U.S. time. Click on the live button and it will bring you to the page where you can join the fun.
Excellent. Obviously, it's going to be a bit tricky for us here in Europe that are 7 hours ahead, but at that time. But hopefully, if some people are prepared to sort of stay up to join you live, hopefully, if we're based over this side of the world, they will do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated the conversation today, Rita. Had a fabulous time.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And I hope that this is helpful for your listeners to be able to tap into their intuition too.
I'm sure it will be. So it just leaves me to say that true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.